Welcome to this episode of the Talent Forge, where we are shaping future behaviors in the workplace. I am super excited because this is a little bit of a redo, but it's for the first time here on the Talent Forge. Welcome to the show, Stephen. We are glad to have you back and here for the first time all again. I'll explain that in a minute, but welcome.
I can only say the first time we tried this and there were technical difficulties, clearly the universe was like, you guys should practice. And I gave you a practice run, so this is going to be great.
Well, if this one is nearly as fun and insightful as the last one, then the audience is in for a treat. So why don't we kick off the same way we did the last time? Tell us a little bit about yourself, Stephen. How did you get into this sort of behavioral talent space? Yeah, give us the rundown.
So of the many episodes that Jay has done with a variety of people, the thing about this episode that may be interesting to you is I'm one of the few people you'll meet who's been a senior executive at a couple motion picture studios. So I worked with a lot of creative types and, mass market sort of high pressure environment. I've also raised over $20 million of venture and run startups, 3 startups, 1 successful exit, 2 failures, right? And it's true, you learn more from the failures, let's be honest, right? So in the course of doing that, notice the patterns of how did high performing teams work together. I'm not an HR executive. I'm much more into sort of the neuroscience of like, how do people encourage in themselves and in others high performance? And that led me to go deep on flow states. And our last version of this was great. I hope we hit some of those points, but I'm sure it'll be fresh and new. So that's why to listen to this episode of his many good ones.
Well, thank you for that, Stephen. So I do want to dig in on what is it like, and because this is something that I think every entrepreneurial endeavor, and even organizations that have been around for a long time, they need innovation, they need creativity, they need new ideas, new thoughts. And when we think about something like the film industry, and you've had some incredible experiences, and I hope that you can share a couple of those. But what is it like when you're in an environment where you need creativity, you need to, because a lot of people will say, well, every movie is the same. It's just taking certain things. But
they all are, right? I mean, we can talk honestly here. Okay.
If we look at the hero story or, the journey or anything else like that.
Yes.
But every now and then we get something that really inspires us, or really is, hey, it takes that, it takes the common tropes and it just does something just a little differently. And somebody somewhere had some safety and had some opportunity to think through that and come up creatively. What is it like to work in that creative space, or how do we get creativity out of people?
You know what? It is incredibly well observed of you to use the word safety in that question. So we're going to go deep for a moment on the film side of my career. There are 2 stories that I want to tell that'll illustrate part of the answer to your question, right? My thoughts on the answer to your question. When we talk about creativity, like you are the leader of a creative team, or you are an individual contributor on a team. You're a copywriter, you're a designer, you may be a developer, an engineer. There are many things you do, but you have to generate, right? You and I are having this conversation in a time when every podcast episode is out about AI eating your job, right? It's pretty much the entire Apple podcast and Spotify podcast is like, what happens with AI? So We're not going to ignore the elephant in the room, but let me tell you 2 stories that predate AI, and then let's sort of put them in modern context. Is that fair?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay. So one story is this. When I was getting out of the University of Southern California, which is where I went undergraduate, and started working in film, which, as you might remember, was an odd thing for me because I was actually trained as an engineer. I was a computer programmer who fell into film because film became digital and they needed people who spoke engineer but were personable enough they could speak to a director about what should the thing look like, right? So my first gig was I was working at an ad agency that did trailers and music videos for movies. A lot of the Warner Brothers, Buena Vista, which is Disney, MGM stuff. And run by 2 very well-respected guys in their 30s, 40s who've been doing this TV, film, blah, blah, blah. For the purpose of the story, Jeff, one of the 2 principals, calls me Stevie. He's the only guy who's ever called me Stevie. You shouldn't call me Stevie, but he was my boss. He just loved calling me Stevie, okay? So my job at the company is we would get in rough cuts of movies. Oh, next summer there's going to be Sony's doing a Will Ferrell comedy with John C. Reilly. Here's a rough cut of the movie. Can you write us a trailer? Give us some ideas of how to promote this, right? So my job was saying, let me assign that to a writer producer. Oh, Jay did that great job last year with that Will Ferrell comedy at MGM. Like, let's see what he does with this, right? So I would assign this. Jeff comes in my office. I'm like 20 years old, right? He's 40. And he goes, Stevie, Bart? And I'm like, there's a guy in the vault named Bart, like delivers tapes and stuff. I think I've been in the elevator with him. Yeah, he seems nice. He's like, you ever given Bart a trailer to write? We're talking about Bart who like picks up lunch and stuff and like delivers film around. I haven't, Jeff. Where are you going with this? He goes, Stevie, I have an instinct about him. Jeff, your name's on the door, man. Okay. Let me find something for him. So I found him like a Warner Brothers B title that had like a month deadline. So if he comes back after a week or two, is like, I hate this. I just want to deliver coffee. I can give it to Jay, the pro, and he'll knock it out that night. You know what I mean? Jeff comes to my office 2 days later. Hey, Stevie, how's Bart doing? Jeff, he's never written a trailer before. It's been 2 days. I'm going to give him through the weekend. Okay, that's fair. What else did you give him? He's never written a trailer before. I gave him one. I don't want him to blow his brains. I'd like try to write 2 things. And Jeff said, Stevie, let me explain to you. Creativity is always about the other thing. If you give him one trailer to focus on, he's going to stare at that with little beads of sweat coming down his temples. And he's going to have every obvious bad instinct on that trailer. Just watch. He said the part of your brain that does I don't know, what would chocolate and peanut butter taste like together? That's not the part you think you're thinking with. You have to give him another movie. So when he's thinking about that, he's going to have the idea, I should do that other thing. And can I tell you, in the rest of my film career and so far my tech career, how many times I've thought of Jeff as I've seen that exact thing proven true. There's a great book on the neuroscience of it called The Net and the Butterfly, which talks about why this is true. I don't know if you've experienced this, Jay, where you have a great idea, driving, swimming, showering, doing the dishes, right?
Yep. Oh, yeah.
Because you have, from an early age, a default mode network, which is like, to be very reductive, like the baby, the child. It's when it looks at a cell phone, it's like, what does that taste like? Well, I don't know. Put it in my mouth, right? And then you develop the executive mode network, which is more like the adult in the room. Got to get our homework done by Tuesday. Oh, I have to do my TPS reports Friday morning. Got to pick up the kid, that sort of thing, right? Now, here's the interesting thing. That default mode network, the one that goes, what does a cell phone taste like? What if chocolate fell in my peanut butter? That gets to play when the executive mode network is busy executing actions, which is why when you're out running, you're driving, you're doing the dishes, you're showering, whatever, and that mode is like, that network is busy, that the default mode goes, hey man, I have an idea. You want to hear something crazy? How about now? Right? So the reason
true.
I share this is whether you want to come at it from a neuroscience point of view or solely, experiential point of view of like, oh yeah, I've been in that situation. You can look at that as an IC and say, okay, how am I developing that in myself? Because if I stare at the thing, it's not going to leap out at me in maybe its best form. And if you're a leader, you understand you need to challenge people by saying, I'm giving you multiple things to work on so that in the back of your mind, I know the default mode network is going, oh, hold on. No one's watching. I'm going to come up with that cool, crazy idea. Fair? Are we good so far?
Yeah.
Okay.
Totally. Because I even think about this in terms of like, it's always when you set the problem down, you end up coming up with the solution to the problem. Like, what was that song? Gosh, I can't remember. And you're like focused on it. And then all of a sudden you shift away and it's like in the middle of a conversation about, turkey dinner. And you're like, that song, it was this.
It was Barry Manilow's Copacabana. I love that. It's true. Yeah. And what's even better? The French have an expression for exactly that. The thing you think of once you've left the conversation, and it's called les mots d'escalier, which means literally like the staircase words. Like you're on the staircase leaving the meeting and you're like, that's what I was trying to remember.
That's awesome.
Okay, so that's one story. Now I'm going to tell you a second story, and I'm going to change some of the details in the story out of respect. You'll understand. So later in my career, as my career has evolved from being like guy assigning trailers to writer producers to I became, through hard work and a lot of luck, an executive vice president at DreamWorks for Kurtzman Orsi, right? And this is the era of Stacy Snyder and Steven running DreamWorks. So this is around, Transformers 1 and 2, Star Trek 11, Eagle Eye, like that era. I remember, even though I'd been in all these rooms, like I'd worked with Mel on Braveheart, I'd worked with Jim Cameron on like David Fincher on Seven, like a lot of stuff, right? So at a certain point, you kind of like lose the excitement of like, oh my God, we've got a meeting with Cameron today. You're like, oh God, not today, right? So I will tell you honestly, the first time I had a meeting, a story meeting in Steven Spielberg's private conference room, we were on the Amblin compound, which is like this beautiful Southwestern Adobe sort of thing that he had custom built on the Universal lot for himself, right? I did have a moment of like, pinch me. I'm sitting in Steven Spielberg's, like at his like 10-person conference table, the rough hewn, cool, like handmade table. I'm sitting here and Steven Spielberg was like 4 feet to my left. Like, how did this happen in life, right? But of course you have to play it cool, like I'm totally belong here, we're all good.
I belong here.
I do this every day, right?
Yeah.
So I'm sitting there and it's Steven and Stacy, the president of DreamWorks, another executive, 2 writers, producers I was working with. And so we're sitting there, we're having this story meeting around a project. And this is where I'm going to falsify some of the details out of respect to Steven, right? Let's just say it's a project that involves aliens. And you're sitting there with Steven Spielberg, who has done some of the best known alien movies on earth. He spent a lot of time thinking about aliens, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So Steven will say something, and he said something like, so that next scene, this is where the alien comes through the wall. But then in coming through the wall, we realize he's like allergic to dust or water or something, this, right? Everyone is like, Steven just said that, write that down, right? The writers are like, noted, scene 15, like the alien comes to the wall, right?
Yeah, right.
Now, someone who was passing through the room, I'm going to call Coffee Boy, right? Hears this and says, oh, I feel like we saw that last year in this other movie. What if it were this other thing? And I thought to myself, oh, that's so adorable. It's the last time we're going to see Coffee Boy alive. Like he'll be in small pieces in a dumpster behind DreamWorks. Like that was a great story.
Did you just question Steven Spielberg?
Exactly. Is there like a trapdoor you fall through and it just like feeds you to meat grinder? Like what happens? And Steven just looked up without batting an eye. I was like, oh, that's better. Let's do that. And the meeting just moved forward. And I thought to myself, that's what confidence looks like in creativity. It's not about my idea, man. It's not about your idea. It's about best idea. We're trying to make the best movie we can. And there wasn't even like a blip. There wasn't like, he contradicted me. It was like, oh no, yeah, that's good. We should do that. And we just moved forward. And I made a note to myself going, wow, the safety he just created in everybody in the room is how he continually attracts the best writers and directors to work at his studio.
It's incredible.
And so that is why when you said the word safety, I was like, ooh, Jay, let's talk about that. Not a lot of people get that.
What a powerful, that is such an incredible story, Stephen, because I'm sitting here and I'm thinking to myself, I would have thought the same thing, like, wow, the audacity of this Coffee Boy, firing off and then to see a leader, and I'm hoping the audience can take that away, is Steven Spielberg has every right to a very big ego. And
sure.
that
I'm not saying he doesn't have one, Jay. I'm just saying in that moment he created safety.
There's always going to be some aspect, but to set that aside and say, hey, that idea is better. Let's go forward with that. Something so simple in a meeting, thinking about just a lot of the executives that I've worked with, if the Coffee Boy was in the room and challenged, the financial forecast of something like, okay, what do you know about financial forecasting? Or what do you know about X, Y, and Z? There would be this like tension or animosity rather than being like, that's really good. Yeah, actually, let's give that a shot. So
completely,
it's a beautiful representation.
I think we're in sync about this. And I hope, those listening or playing along at home or in the car, this is directionally helpful for you about like people who I think inarguably at the top of their game create this. And I'll tell you this, what I saw is a lot of the mid-level, let's say the mediocre players, are the ones that become very precious with their ideas. And it stifles creativity, right? If I feel like I have 3 ideas two of them might be really bad, one might be brilliant, but I don't know which one it is. And you, Jay, make me feel okay saying all three, and then you're never going to blame me for the two bad ideas. I'm going to continually just bubble up ideas on your team, right? And that's because you create that environment. So I promised that we would use the buzzword AI. So I don't want to not deliver on that promise. Shall we talk about that for a moment?
We shall. I'm going to share with you real quick a
Ooh.
funny story, and it's about that idea generation. I had, when I was working in a university, I had one of the most brilliant minds in mathematics and engineering that I was working with. And he, at one point in time, sat me down and looked at me and said, Jay, I'm going to come up with 10 different ideas every single day. 9 of those ideas should literally never see the light of day. One of those ideas might be okay. It's your job to help me figure out which one's which and which one we're going to pursue. And I'm just like, oh, no pressure. But I mean, it was literally like that. It was just like, I'm going to toss these out. Your job's to help me sort through those. So when you said that, I just had this, this mental image of that. But
And that's
how
true. What he
often,
said to you, even
yeah,
though, yes, we consider mathematics and physics and these sciences to be hard, sort of binary yes, no kind of endeavors, it's very true what he said to you. He was like, hey, man, I've got a whole bunch of ideas. I need you to help me sift through them and find the gold. Like, it's applicable in many ways. So I think the takeaway, obviously, for people who come to your pod is if you are creating an environment where you want to reduce, a burnout and frustration, and increase the way good ideas get bubbled up and selected, then these are just simple things you can do, and they come from you. They radiate outwards from the leader, right?
I think that the last takeaway that I want to share there is the importance of not disparaging the 9 ideas. And you said this earlier, is that that person felt safe to say something, or they had the audacity to say something, and then all of a sudden everybody else feels safe. But I have seen so many times where after the meeting somebody says, we could maybe do this, and it's like, well, why didn't you bring that up in the meeting? And it was because of that lack of safety. So making sure that as leaders or as trainers or as coaches, whatever we might be, that we create that space of not necessarily that there's no bad ideas, but there's ideas that we're not going to pursue, but celebrating even somebody bringing something to the
Can
forefront.
I give you the easiest tool to use for that?
Absolutely. I love it.
So let's suppose, yes, I'm on your team, Jay. I have 3 ideas. I think one's great. I don't know which one. I have 10 ideas as an engineer. I think one's great, and I need you to sort them out, right? To make me feel safe, because sometimes Stephen and Jay might have a good relationship where I'm like, hey, Jay protects me. He's helping me get the best out of me. But there's also George next to me who wants to disparage my ideas because he sees me as competitive, right? And that's a real
Right.
thing, right?
Yep. Yeah.
The way in which you let me say something like, I don't know, 2 and 2 might be 5. I'm just toying with, does anyone feel that way? And before George can go like, you're an idiot, like
Oh,
established
yeah.
before, the thing that is so easy to diffuse all that is to say, how many times have I seen the idea we didn't use as the springboard for someone else to come up with the other idea? So if you don't say the thing that you might even think is stupid, you take away the ability for the person next to you to say, oh, not that, but this.
That's true. That iteration, that sort of like prototyping, testing, and moving forward, such a powerful aspect. And we lose a lot when somebody is not sharing their insight because they may be holding that puzzle piece that actually unlocks the rest of it. So, really well said, Stephen. I love that. All right, let's move forward. AI. Sorry, derailed us again. Yeah.
Yeah, here we go. Here we go. And let's be clear, like people right now are using the term AI, conflating it with LLMs, large language models largely, right? Where it's like, oh, hey, I can get this LLM to do this kind of repetitive work for me because it's been pattern trained on all the repetitive work out in the world, right? So there's a lot to AI, and I don't want to diminish the other parts of machine learning, the deep learning, all the things, right? But let's talk about this because everyone who's in a knowledge field is looking at, ooh, can I lay everyone off on my team and just use agents? Or oh shit, I'm going to get laid off because there's an agent doing my job, right? Okay.
Yeah, right.
So let's talk about that, because yes, the steam engine is going to replace, horses, and the combustion engine is going to help, all these things, right? Progress is going to happen. It's just the force of the economics or such. However, when you think about, well, then what is the value that I bring? Because the value will no longer be, hey, I can follow a pattern of things I've done in the past and do more of that, right? So there are two things that are starting to stand out. One is, as good as LLMs are, they don't have relationships, right? There's no authenticity to the relationship.
Yep.
So my ability to call Jay and say, hey, Jay, listen, man, I got an idea. I think there's probably someone in your network that could help me with this. Can you help me? And you're like, oh, Stephen, I like you. We have a relationship. We help each other. I can do that, right? So that's something that is still the ability to build relationships is very important. I don't want to go deep into that one here. Rather, I want to go to the second part, which is something very close to my heart. When you decide to do the thing, as you said in the beginning of this episode, that moves forward the art form. The art form could be financial accounting. It could be design of an app. It could be copywriting. It could be, coding a new mobile app, whatever it is, right? Yes, an LLM trained on everything that came before LLMs are like Google autocomplete on steroids. I've looked at everything that's ever been written. I can bet the next letter you're going to type is S. And then it takes that to say, oh, and the next word you're probably going to type is this. Oh, the next idea you're probably going to want is this. And it just sort of puts that together in a way that gives the illusion of thought. But it's actually just saying like, hey, man, it's probability. Like if you say the weather outside is
statistics.
40% chance you're going to say rainy. And when I say rainy, you go, oh my God, it's so intelligent. No, it's just, it knows. You live in wherever, right? Okay. So if you want to go deep and do something that actually moves your particular discipline forward, you do that in units that are not like time between Zoom meetings, and, oh, I'm trying to scrape together a couple minutes before I go to lunch, right? It becomes more and more important to actually have dedicated focus time to say, I'm going to go into a flow state. I'm going to, whether I'm a writer, a designer, an engineer, whatever it may be, I'm going to give myself the time for my brain to start blocking out distractions, actually doing the things that later LLMs will be trained on, as opposed to LLMs could just regurgitate this because it's what's been done. And I hope we can go during the course of the episode into some of the techniques to achieve that. But that's what I think is super interesting is like, even with the advent of the LLMs, relationships are important. And those things you do that only a human can push forward the frontier, the pattern is extended, not repeated.
Well, let's dig right into that because, and this is something that I've found interesting, the concept of flow state. I think people sometimes, I do think people sometimes, let's say, they get so excited about being able to multitask. Oh, I'm a fantastic
what is multitasking? What is it?
It's your brain code switching between two attention functions and pathways very, very quickly because you're not actually focusing. Yeah, you're not actually
you've read
focusing.
all the books. Okay, go on.
Right. But flow state, I think, sometimes can be confusing. It's like, well, am I in flow? When am I in flow? How do I get into flow? And I think that that's such a fascinating conversation, especially when we put it in. Yeah.
Let's do that.
Okay? Go for it.
I know you know this, but let's just, for the benefit of anyone out there who's not a flow master already, some of your audience is, but some of your audience may be like, I have a passing understanding of it, right?
Yep.
Hungarian-American psychologist, Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. He had a thesis. He's like, hey man, it's weird the way you can talk to high performers in different disciplines, athletes and artists and scientists and inventors. And when they talk about those concentrated states where they do the thing that makes them famous, the thing we know them for, the way they describe those states is very similar, even though what they're doing is very different. He's like, what up with that, right? So thankfully for us, he did the research, did the interviews, at the end of it, wrote a book called Flow. It is the seminal work on this. It's why we call it a flow state. And he said the greatest thing. He said, I chose this word because it was the most beautiful metaphor for what I found. We are all on the river, paddling to move ourselves forward. But if you align your boat with the current, it carries you, it magnifies your efforts. And that is what these people figured out how to do. And that was fascinating to me because I'll tell you this. I did not know what a flow state was the first time I experienced, like you said, like, was I in a flow state? I had never heard of it. I couldn't ask myself, was that a flow state? I was flying from Austin, like, where I am now, to San Francisco. The next day, I had a meeting with my team. And there was an idea I had for a feature that I thought, with my hacky Figma skills, I'll mock this up so I can kind of show it. And if there's enthusiasm, like, designers can finish this and make it work right? Alaska runs that nonstop. Get on the flight. Captain's like, sorry, kids, Wi-Fi's out. Haha, see you in San Francisco, So we take off. Like, I start working. 15, 20 minutes later, we start descending. And I was like, okay, we're in Dallas. Like, something's wrong with the plane. They're going to tell us when we're on the ground. Like, oh, the hydraulics. We're going to switch, equipment or whatever. I looked down. 2 hours and 40 minutes had gone by. I had no concept. I couldn't tell you if the drink cart had come down the aisle.
Yep.
But my designs were done and I liked them. And maybe you've done this. I had prepared myself for the get in the Uber, grab a sandwich in the hotel, whatever restaurant thing, go upstairs, stay up, working in my little hotel room, trying to get ready for tomorrow. I got in the Uber. I called a buddy of mine. I was like, hey, man, I have a free night. Do you want to go and have dinner? And it was an amazing feeling to be ahead of my day and feeling like I had done good work. And then later, as I learned more about flow states, I was like, oh, I was in a flow state. And Mihaly talks about this. He goes, here's the deal. Flow states are characterized by you lose track of time, distractions fall away. Like, you become sort of one with the work. You often do your best work quickly. And at the end of it, you can feel a sense of uplift, a sense of joy, as opposed to a sense of depletion. And I was like, check. That was, why didn't someone tell me about this in college?
Right. Oh, that's so funny. Well, and I think about it because, so I was a long time ago, far since retired. I played hockey. And I remember that, being in kind of one of those states is not the practices where it was like the coach was trying to punish you because you had a bad game before. It's like, all right, you're going to skate mountains the entire time and up and back until you puke.
Yeah.
Not that practice. But I remember so many different times where it'd be like, all right, practice is over. And it's just like, we had 2 hours.
Right. Where to go?
Like, I feel like I've been on the ice for like 15 minutes. And it's just like, it's all of a sudden you get into
when
that
did you
sort of
first
zone.
connect that experience with that's a flow state? When did you know it beforehand or after you're like, that's what
I didn't at that time. Yeah, I learned about flow states quite a while after that. And I've realized that I've had very, very extended flow states, whether it's in behavioral science research or anything else like that. And it's just like, huh. But yeah, at that time I had no idea. I was just like, wow, time flies when you're having fun is, what everybody says, right? So and it slows to a crawl when you're absolutely mourning whatever you're doing.
Yes, true. And okay, to go back to Mihaly, since let me say this. Anything smart that I share in this episode is because Mihaly and subsequent researchers have spent their lives figuring this out. And I'm just here to share. Okay. So it's not like I'm smart. I'm just trying to be helpful. So that said, Mihaly wrote about, okay, so what are the conditions precedent that seem to encourage, your brain to drop into a flow state? And is flow state a thing, or is it just kind of a mythical, like, placebo-like effect thing, right? So he said it seems common among these high performers that they only get into a flow state when they are doing something they think is meaningful, right? It's not like stapling TPS reports or sweeping the floors or something, right? They're doing something where they have skills that apply. I always laugh about, there's that great Michael Jordan quote about when I'm in the zone, it's just me and the ball, like everything falls away. It's a great way of just saying, like, if I control this ball, I will do the things that 30 years later, kids going to watch on a highlight reel, right? It's not really about the stands. It's not really about the scoreboard or even the defenders. It is about control of this ball. The world reduces down to that. He said, so they have to believe it's meaningful. They have to have skills that apply. They have to be operating at a level that's challenging, right? And it is interesting that there are some things that since, he wrote his original book, different researchers have discovered that help our brains get into this state of being open to flow. A lot of it is around oral environment. And I'll tell you, to speak briefly about I set up a company to create a flow state website to help people get in, right? One of the foundational things was music. And there's a lot of research around, it seems like for most people, the sweet spot is 60 to 90 beats per minute, certain key signatures, non-vocal, you're not singing along with Blackpink or Britney or whatever, your jam is, the Wicked show tunes. But long melodic passages, like things like that. So I happen to have a bunch of friends who are film composers with time on their hands. So I was like, hey, can you write like 1,000 hours of music like this for this flow state app I'm creating? So put that in there. Random thing happens. A buddy who is up in Marin, he is a mixer. He does the sound for a lot of the LucasArts, the Star Wars games. He calls me up. He's like, hey, man, I just got back from Nepal. I'm like, good for you. Great. He's like, yeah, it was my kid's graduation gift from high school because I guess he did really well, got into a good college. And, Julian was like, where do you want to go? And he's like, I want to go to Nepal. So he said, while we were there, one day in Kathmandu, it rained so hard, we didn't leave. It was this lush, warm, delicious rain. And I had some of my recording equipment with me, which I always do. I recorded like 2 hours of rain because it was so cool. I got back and I'm not really sure what to do with it, but I know you're doing that flow state app. So I was wondering, like, do you want this? And I was like, for free? Sure. I mean, why not? So he and I agreed to quietly, in all, the lo-fi playlists and the up tempo, in the middle of them, just drop an entry for a playlist that was called Himalayan Dream Rain. No announcement, no nothing, just 2 hours of rain that loops. It quickly became our third most popular playlist. And I was like, what? All this like scientifically designed, like film composer scored music. So I run the platform, so I know people's email addresses. So I emailed some people who were listening to it. I was like, hey man, Jay, would you chat with me for 5 minutes? I'd like to understand. I paid all this money for this music, but you listen to rain. What's that about? And I'm going to tell you, if you were to reduce down every person I spoke to, they said a version of, it evokes in me a period in the past when I had to study and it was raining out. I was raised by my grandmother in Georgia. At finals, it would always be pouring rain. I'd be inside. My family had a Blake house. And you go down it, and I was like, oh, so wow. So it is, again, a neural connection you have to this is when I need to focus. So I share all this to say there are some fantastic focus music, services, Brain FM, Endel, like there are tons of them, right? They're wonderful. But that was a real awakening to me to say, oh, so there are other ways in which you trigger a flow state orally. And after we threw up the rain one, there is a blogger in the UK, kind of well known, who's one of our members. She emailed me and said, hey, I noticed you put up a non-musical playlist. That's the first time I've seen you do that. Can I ask you something? And I was like, absolutely. What? She goes, well, I had a baby during the pandemic. I used to write my little famous blog at this coffee shop outside London. I can't really go there with a 2-year-old now, whatever, I was like, okay. She's like, any chance you would throw up a playlist that was just the sound of being in a coffee shop? Because that evokes for me the feeling of like, oh, I'm here writing my cool little single girl blog or whatever, right? Uh-huh. And we did. It became popular. I also threw up a bunch of other nature playlists, by the way, like surf and streams.
Nice.
Nobody listened. I don't know. There's no connection there. It's just like, thank you, Stephen, but no. So I share this to say there are a number of ways in which you can create the conditions precedent for yourself. I need to go deep, or for your team to say, hey, let's do that. I've been talking a bunch. Back to you in the studio, Jay.
Well, no, I think that's super fascinating because for me and like the rain tracks or anything like that, if I want the best sleep of my life, it's when it's raining. It's always when it's raining. And it's just that, it's that sort of like calm peacefulness that comes from it. I've gotten into the concepts of some of this like green noise and white noise and how that actually has an impact on the brain.
Okay. So you're talking to my heart here.
All right. So why don't you share this? Because I think a lot of people still haven't quite caught up with some of the research on green noise, brown noise, white noise, what it actually does at like the neural circuitry level. So can you jump into that? Oh my God.
Yeah. Because this is wonderful. Okay. So what Jay is talking about at a very high level is everyone I think is familiar with white noise, which is often associated with like there's some sort of antenna that's picking up just random background noise. Your TV's not tuned to a station, your radio's not tuned to a station. It's kind of like in the old days, right? Now everyone's sort of
Yep.
on Spotify. But that sense of just like that sort of noise, that then led to some researchers saying, well, actually the way we perceive sound is not even across the entire spectrum, right? We are more sensitive to certain frequencies and they roll off at different ends. What if we were to create different versions of white noise? Like it still sounds kind of like white noise if you're not listening closely, but oh, maybe we will boost the frequencies that we're naturally not attuned to hear so that all comes out to be even, things like that, right? So this has turned into a cottage industry of having pink noise and brown noise and green noise and all stuff, which are all related. And there is some thought, which is very hard to prove, unfortunately, that it does evoke in us a feeling of safety, which we talked about earlier, which gives you more sense of agency, more sense of comfort to do something, because it is akin to, in the womb, the sound of the mother's blood moving around you in the amniotic fluid and that sort of thing. It's just like the background shh. It's just continuous when you are being baked. It is the first sound you ever hear. So I, as Jay knows, but none of you guys know, I have a 4-month-old downstairs. And I will tell you, that is one of the best things that we got was a tiny little speaker that just generates different kinds of white noise.
Got one too. And I will tell you, I have always been a really good sleeper. I mean, my time to fall asleep, like I lay my head on the pillow, 15 seconds, I'm out. And when I wake up in the morning, it is like boom. I usually wake up before my alarm. I'm very, very fortunate in this. But within the last several months, uh, I had a little stint where my sleep was just destroyed. I have no idea. I couldn't fall asleep. Like first time in my entire life, I actually experienced some level of insomnia,
Wow.
which is what put me on this pathway of like, okay, when I don't understand something or when something's happening, it's like dig into the research, find out everything. It like I'll have a PhD by tomorrow on whatever it is. So I ended up going down the pathway of understanding some of the green noise, and I ended up finding an app, and I ended up downloading the app. And I will tell you that after it was no joke. It had been probably like 5 6 nights in a row that I just didn't feel rested. I wasn't getting good sleep, and I used this, and it was just like this kind of ambient green noise in the background. There was a little bit of hypnosis voice that came in at the beginning of it for roughly like I don't know like a minute and a half of hypnotic voice that kind of came through, and then it was just this 30 minutes of just like green noise as they called it immediately. I don't know that I made like it just triggered me right back into like my normal sleeping patterns. I used the 7 day trial and it was great. And then I didn't actually buy the app. Um, I didn't actually
I
buy
keep
the app.
using new email addresses to sign up for 7-day trials.
Yeah, so I was like, all right, I used the 7 day, but I ended up, so it was funny because whatever the trigger was, it came back, and sure enough, I went back into that. I was like, okay, buy the app now. So I bought the app. I don't have to use it every single night, but on the rare occasion where either my brain just won't shut off or where I'm experiencing some kind of like high stress, high anxiety state, I click that thing on, and sure enough, it's just lights up. So it's been really really useful from that perspective. How and because I really want to and your company Suka, am I pronouncing that
Super,
correctly?
that's right. It means happiness in Sanskrit.
So it helps to put people into this flow state. What are some of the and we know the the Michael Jordan, it's just me and the ball. We know the
Mhm.
the concept of what we're talking about. All of a sudden we just kind of find ourselves in the zone. We hear different ways of people framing
Yes.
the flow state. Why do you think why is it so important? Whether you're a senior leader, an executive at a company, or whether you're that frontline manager, or whether you're the employee trying to get the job done, why do you think it's important for us as professionals to try to seek time in this flow state? Like, what's the value to me as an individual to get into that state? What's the value to me as a leader of a company to help my people to be able to do that? What's the value
That is
proposition?
a
I guess I
great
would
place to
ask.
start. and it is not valuable for everyone. So I have now, tens of thousands of people have come into what we do. And I can tell you, even friends who are passionate about, I want to try what you're building. The pattern is this. If ultimately your success, like your contribution to your team, is about leading a team, about interacting with people, being on Zooms, being in board meetings, traveling to conferences, flow states are not really valuable to you because you're going to spend most of your time building relationships, networking, gathering information, right? Now, if your win, quote, I'm putting air quotes on that for those listening at home, if your win is in knowledge work, I'm going to create something, then flow states are like a turbocharger on your engine. So that is why a lot of our membership, engineers writing code, writers, bloggers, copywriters, writing, designers designing, because there is something to, I can kind of shit out a version of this blog post I need to write. I can kind of like take that app over there and kind of do a mock-up of what this screen should be. But that's not actually the thing that the team does when they go, oh, I went deep. Actually, I have a new way of doing this. Like if you think about even like dating apps, remember when Tinder came out and it brought the swipe in? The swipe, that's thought. Like that moved it forward. Like an LLM would not have predicted a design pattern of a swipe because it hadn't existed before. But after Tinder, it would recommend a swipe to every other designer that's asking to do something, right? So the answer to your question is, flow states are not actually important unless you're doing work where you create something. You need to do knowledge work. And if it is, then it's more important now than ever because the LLMs will do the pattern matched rote work better, faster, cheaper than you.
Yeah. No, that's huge. And I like to tie back to that because I think a lot of people are worried about exactly what you said earlier. AI is going to take over my job, or I'm not going to be needed, or I can just do all of these things, but it doesn't do the creative thinking, and it doesn't do the creative design. I mean, yes, it can take your image and design out and say, make Steven look like, a knight Templar from the, whatever. And sure, it can do that, but you're still giving it the direction and coding. But if you tell it to do something that's not existent yet, it can't do it.
And if you're leading a team, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah, no, fire away. If you're leading a team.
If you're leading a team, and there's a difference, as we've discussed, between managing and leading, right? Managing is, hey man, the TPS reports are due Friday at 10. Like we all get them in and go to the staff meeting, right?
Come on, let's go. Yeah,
exactly. Okay. The way I view leadership, and this is not uncommon, but I think it's an important distinction, is if you as a leader say, I have cast my team well, like I have a design team, each person is here because they have a very specific great skill in design or copywriting or coding, whatever. And they have greatness within them. You have a thesis that there is greatness in each of these people on your team. Then your job as a leader is to elicit that, to draw that out of them. But the best thing you can do is give them the tools and the conditions to do that, right? So, for example, I'm not going to name names, but a friend of mine works in an organization where she contributes high-level ideas to the strategy of this corporation. Her immediate superior schedules meetings in such a way that it is very hard during the day to ever have an hour, or imagine 2 hours, to go deep. And that's the thing, is he expects that they're going to sit in a staff meeting with 40 people and do the awful stand-up thing of like, hey, Jay, what are you up to? Well, yesterday I worked on this. Tomorrow I'm working on that. I'm not blocked right now. And you go around and do this, like these reporting that you nowhere, when what you really want is you want Jay to walk in and go, actually, I went to the beach with my dog yesterday for 2 hours, and I just walked and I thought about what our competitor launched. And there's a weakness it exposes. We should exploit this. They're missing, this is really the customer desire. And everyone in the meeting kind of like pivots their head and goes, we should leave the meeting and go build that like right now. Like, let's get out of here and go do that, right? Because that's ultimately that's how billion-dollar corporations are built. They're not built on, well, I did this yesterday and I'm doing this today and I'm not blocked. It's like, ugh. So you as a leader can create that, but that means you have to then budget time to say, like, to get into flow. There's a lot of research. There's a great University of California Irvine study that says it takes 20 to 23 minutes from the time you sit down, you sort of block your distractions until you'll be in flow. You don't sit down and go, I'm in a flow state. I'm doing great work. It's like your brain sort of falls into it. And by the way, they have measured in an fMRI how the brain activity changes in a flow state. There was a great study with jazz musicians, as they go into like a jazz trio, and there's a point in improv where you just become one with the music and one with, the people in your little trio or quartet. And it's interesting, their brain activity actually kind of shuts down in their prefrontal cortex. And if you want to create that in your team, then you can't ignore this. You have to say, hey, you know what? Even if it's an experiment, to say, what if we were to each week set aside 2 hours where you agree we're not going to set meetings with clients, we're not going to bug each other in Slack or Teams, right? And just go deep. And let's try it for 2 or 3 weeks and see, like, does something come out of that? No one's going to be punished, as we talked about the safety thing, right? If you don't have the great thought, you're not going to be made fun of, you're not going to be fired. But what if we just try that? And in that 2 hours, you think about what in your area of this organization would move us forward. And maybe you design a new feature and mock it up and go, what if we were to build this? Maybe it's, you have an ad you think we should run that you've never had the time to actually mock up before, and you just do that. That's where you get those, like you said, 9 of these are not things we're going to do. The 10th one, it's probably $1 billion.
Yeah. I don't know. Every time that I have a conversation with you, Stephen, it excites me, because it's one of those where it's like, all right. And I have found that I structure my day. Like, and I'm the CEO, but I structure my day. So like my Tuesdays are often strictly either podcasts or conversations and, different like exploration site. It's really one of my more creative days. And I find that when I book myself with creative ventures back to back to back to back, that I get myself into sort of like, oh, look at this.
A state.
And I have other days that are just, these are my design days. These are the days that I'm sitting there and going, how could I deliver this content differently? What would that look like? What would it be like if I were to shift the way that this activity rolls on this activity? And then there's other days that are okay, I need to answer all of these emails, and I need to respond, and I need to get these reports done, and so on and so forth. And I will tell you, the days that I have the most joy are my more creative days.
I have a question. I'm going to interrupt you.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
On the days when you want to go deep, what are the distractions that you fight, and how do you fight them?
So one of them is obviously email. Email is a big distraction.
Email on your laptop or on your phone?
Both.
Okay.
But what I will do is and it's sometimes as simple as I just shut the tab down on the laptop and I put the phone over on the other side of the room. It's just, I can't reach it. So when I'm in the middle of doing something, and it's just creating friction to get to those spaces is essentially what I do. And then that kind of keeps me out of it. I am fairly disciplined when I say I go to focus pieces, right? Like I can have a giant bowl of chocolate chip cookies in front of me and still keep myself to only having one, because I know that that's what I need to do.
You're a better man than I. That's why you have those great shoulders in the pecs, because you're like disciplined, Stephen.
If it's if it's 9 o'clock at night, let me tell you, then it's game on, right? So the longer the day goes, the harder it is to maintain whatever discipline it is. So if I can create the friction for the things I don't want to do and create the ease of entry for the things I do want to do, I find that I can go longer in that sort of like focus state or into that flow state. So email would be a big one. And then honestly, I would say that it's my own internal ADHD, is that when I get into an idea and then all of a sudden I'm just like, oh, squirrel. And I'm like, oh, what about this idea? And then all of a sudden, like my initial focal point has been shifted to something else that's really fascinating and interesting. But to your point, that's where some of my best ideas have come, is when I've allowed myself to sort of like shift in between those things. Or it's like I go back to the other thing with a different level of energy and a different level of focus.
And let
So,
me let
yeah,
me bifurcate that a little bit, which is
yeah,
there is an element of brainstorming, like you're talking about, which is non-linear. It's like I'm thinking about this for a little bit, then I'm thinking about this, I'm thinking about
yep,
this, and there's an element of execution where it's like multitasking is your enemy. You said it earlier.
yep,
Multitasking is simply monotasking, which is what your brain does, and burning extra energy, context switching, right?
yep.
So
It's
those
so
two
true.
things between brainstorming and executing are require different sort of practices, let's say.
Yeah. So those would be my bigger distractions. I think that and I like the way that you contextualize that, because when I am brainstorming, it's like, oh, let's go down this pathway. Let's check this out. Let's
Mm-hmm.
look at this. But when it's like, all right, I've got a presentation. I've already done all the brainstorming. I've already done all the research. Now it's
Mm-hmm.
just getting into that moment. There's virtually, and I mean, there's virtually nothing that can distract me in that moment, because once I get in, it's just like, oh, this,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just over and over again. And I do achieve that flow state. And it's funny that you say that 20 minutes, because there's been points in times where the first 20 minutes has been an absolute like slugfest slog of like, oh God, this doesn't look right. And then all of a sudden it's just, you feel it kind of ramp up, and it's
Yeah.
like, all right, there we go. All right, we're back.
Right.
Here it is. Here it
This
is.
is true. Now, do
So
you take breaks when you are working on creating and you're in flow? Do you just work straight through, or do you take breaks? How do you do that?
when I'm doing more of execution tasks, I try to give myself a break every 45 minutes. When I'm doing some of the design or some of those other things, if I get to a point where it's like, no, it's almost like if I've popped out of, but no, like there's been points in times where I've worked straight 3 hours and just not thought about it.
Yeah.
And then afterwards, I'm like, kind of hungry. Oh, it's because it's been 3.5 hours. I
Right.
should
Where are the
probably
chocolate
go
chip
eat something.
cookies?
And I'll go take my break at that point in time. But so like I don't force myself to stay in a state, but if I'm there and I'm dialed in, I'm just rolling with it.
Okay, let me share something because this is something I'd thought about a bunch in
Mm-hmm.
designing Suko, which is this guy Francesco Cirillo, Italian guy, came up with this concept of there's a cadence that seems to work for him, right? And he used a kitchen timer shaped like a
Yep.
tomato, which is why we call it the Pomodoro technique. But he said, what seems to work is if I work for 25 and then I take a 5 minute
25 and
break and I
5.
repeat that cycle a
Yep.
few times and I take a longer break, sort of thing, right? So I'll tell you this again, starting from best research out there, when we were designing Suko, we're like, we should base all this around a Pomodoro timer, right? It's a very common way of doing that. And I found it didn't exactly work for me. I felt like at 25 minutes, I was in the middle of a thought. It was invariably like, oh, not now. I'm just about to get to the good part, right? So we made it editable. And it
Oh,
turned out to be
nice.
a big unlock with our members because so many other people felt that way, but they thought there was this like religion around 25 and 5 written on tablets that he brought down from Mount Sinai or whatever, right? And so what we did was we gave you a timer. You can click it with your mouse, type in anything you want. Like I find I worked really well about 50 minutes, like
Yep.
almost two
45 is
Pomodoros
mine.
mashed together.
Yep.
And little things like that as you begin to adapt and say like, okay, the research is true in the aggregate. Maybe some of it needs to be fine tuned to me. The same way, like, that blogger said, hey, could I have a coffee shop? Can I listen to a coffee shop? I know it's not traditional, but it helps me. And it's like, know thyself.
Absolutely. So, Stephen, this is one of those examples of kind of being in flow and just having a conversation with you. I've realized,
Oh my God, have
oh my
7 hours
goodness,
gone by? How long went
yeah,
by? Latest dinner?
well, I think this has been incredibly valuable, because when we think about behavior change, when we think about like shifting the behaviors in a workplace, we all want higher efficiency. We all want to be more productive. We want our teams to be more productive. And I think a lot of what we've talked about today in sort of moving us towards those flow
Mhm.
states, or to being able to create this space for innovation and safety for innovation, creativity,
Mhm.
I think is so important. And I think it's something that's often missed in leadership. So, as we sort of round the bases here, let me ask you: if our audience wanted to get in touch with you, or if they wanted to learn more about Suka, where would they do so?
Oh, I appreciate the question. There are two very simple answers. If there's anything that I've said that someone wants to know more about, it doesn't have to be about my company. It doesn't have, hey, you mentioned Cal Newport, or you talked about Francesco Trullo, whatever. My email address is very public. It is Steven, Steven, at thesuka, THESUKHA.co. Email me. I'm not going to email you back my life story. I don't have time and you don't care, right? But I'll be like, oh, there's a great blog post about Francesco. You read about, this, or you want to see the University of Irvine study. Here's a link, right? So that's available. If someone wants to or wants their team to try getting into a flow state, we made an app that helps people do that. And it's shockingly at thesuka, THESUKHA.co. It's free for 3 days. Just try it, use it 72 hours straight if you want. Having so many friends who have worked or currently work at one of the Facebook meta companies or at Twitter X, I think it is criminal how much time, energy of the smartest people we have in design and behavioral economics and psychology go towards creating apps that waste our lives. And if we fundamentally believe that there is some greatness in all of us, maybe it's writing the great American novel, maybe it's creating a new company, maybe it is making the best ad ever, whatever that greatness is, those companies' business model is making sure that you don't do it. Because their model is, if you wake up and you're 80 and you're still scrolling and double tapping on the sofa, we win. And I think that's criminal. So yeah, do that. Do that for your team. Help them release the greatness and not, go to the graveyard with the greatness inside them.
Such a powerful statement. So I gotta say, it is a pleasure. It was a pleasure the last time, and it is as much of a pleasure this time.
When you tell me that this one didn't record well, we'll just do it a fourth time. It's gonna be awesome.
I look forward to it. We'll get in flow again.
Well, thank you, Jay.
I think we should be in good. Yeah, thank you for taking the time to be here, share that insights, those stories, that knowledge. It's really been helpful. And like I said, I've lost track of time because I'm just like, oh, tell me more. Let's dig in.
More, exactly.
But thank you so much for being here, Stephen.
This is awesome. Thanks.
And thank you, audience, for tuning into this episode of The Talent Forge, where together we are shaping workforce behaviors.